What's going down, everyone? And welcome back to another edition of John Amo's Archives. Now, today I wanted to do another throwback wrestling edition, and I wanted to talk to you guys about one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm a straight up 80's kid. I grew up in the 80's era. I love everything about the 80's. When I was growing up, we got WWF. We got NWA, which later became WCW. We got the AWA, World Class Championship Wrestling. We pretty much, Florida Championship Wrestling. We pretty much had it all. So I was very lucky in the sense that there's not a wrestler out there who I didn't watch growing up. I watched Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA, the Road Warriors, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Ric Flair, Jesse the Body Ventura, Great Muta, Stan Hansen, Dr. Death Steve Williams, Steiner Brothers. I mean, you name it, and I pretty much watched it. Now, that being said, I was always impartial to the WWF product back in the day. As far as quality and television production, they were light years ahead of all the other federations. Vince McMahon knew something that nobody else knew. He knew how important television was from a very early point, and he rolled with it. If you liked wrestling, WWF was not the place for you. It was probably the NWA, which is rolling off much higher quality matches than WWF. But I was 8 years old, so to me, I like the gimmicks, the gobbledygooker. I was like, oh, maybe not the gobbledygooker, but anyway. So one guy though that I always watched in the other, I watched them all, but one guy who I always loved, because I always loved the bad guys, was the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And being a WWF fan and a Ric Flair fan, I just dreamt of the day, like, will this guy ever go to the WWF? I mean, come on, Rick, do it. We want to see you against Hulk Hogan. It was just a dream encounter for years and years, and it didn't happen right away at first. Now, for those of you who watched my top 10 video of all time, you'll notice that I placed Shawn Michaels number 1 and Ric Flair number 2. Now, the only reason why I rated Shawn Michaels ahead of Ric Flair is because Ric Flair has tarnished his legacy by not retiring in a timely fashion. Shawn Michaels in WrestleMania 25 or whatever number it was, I think it was 25, sent him out in a retirement match. It was a 5-star, fantastic, classic match. The last best match Ric Flair had, and it was the perfect note for Ric Flair to walk off into the sunset and to hang up his boots and to call it a career. Unfortunately, Ric Flair is a little psycho. We found out these last 10 years, for whatever reason, he can't let go. And, for me, for the wrestling fan who watched Ric Flair growing up and who watched him in all his classic matches and can legitimately call him my favorite wrestler at the time, it's a little bit hard for me to watch Ric Flair nowadays when he's out there, falling on the mat and doing his strut, and, because I don't think kids today realize just how cool Ric Flair was back in the day. I mean, this guy, for those of you who think CM Punk's tattoos are cool and the Straight Edge Society gimmick is cool, Ric Flair was the epitome of cool, and he didn't have to try to do it. He was just cool. He used to walk into the studio, and he used to get the whole entire studio in an uproar with his wooing and his his jet flying, limousine riding, styling and profiling. So Ric Flair was really at a whole nother level, and this is a testament to Ric Flair and how good he really was. 1989 was WrestleMania 5. It was Randy Macho Man Savage versus Hulk Hogan. In the WWF. The NWA decided to throw the WWF a curveball, and they actually broadcast Clash of Champions at the exact same time as WWF's WrestleMania. I'll never forget this day. And so my dad, obviously he's a little bit older than me, he's my dad, and he was more into the NWA because he's older and he liked the matches and he wasn't really into the gimmicks. He still watched the WWF, don't get me wrong, he's a wrestling geek just like me. So this day in 1989, these two shows were on the same channel, and I was watching WrestleMania 5 downstairs, and my pops was watching Clash of Champions, whatever it was, upstairs. And, we were kind of yelling back and forth to each other. And there was no way you were getting me to move from my seat because I was watching WrestleMania, and that was that. I wanted to watch Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. But my dad was making these really weird noises upstairs, like nothing that I've ever heard. Jonathan, you got to come up here. You got to come up here. And so the NWA was smarter. They kicked off it was Ric Flair, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in a classic 2 out of 3 falls match that went a little at the hour, went 1 hour. And this match took me away from WrestleMania 5. I taped the main event. I went upstairs. I watched Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat, 2 out of 3 falls on free television for an hour, and I watched the Hulk Hogan Randy Savage match later. So that's just a testament to how good, Ric Flair was. And he never had a bad match. In his early career with his feuds with take Dusty Rhodes. You look at Dusty, and don't get me wrong, Dusty Rhodes is a good performer. I don't want to knock the guy because he's a little bit overweight. But Dusty Rhodes never had no 5-star matches. But you put him in the ring with Ric Flair, instantly 5-star. His matches with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, those were probably Ric Flair's best matches of all time. Ricky Steamboat, I will say, is probably Ric Flair's best feud. Then you move on to even rugged Ronnie Garvin, this little 5'8" dude who couldn't have a good match with a broomstick until he got, that doesn't make any sense. Couldn't have a good match with Bret Hart, which probably he would. But anyway, Ric Flair managed to even have a great match with Ronnie Garvin. And then you take someone like, he basically, in the first Clash of Champions, he made Sting. They wrestled to a 45-minute draw. You heard that right, a 45-minute draw. When's the last time you've seen John Cena or CM Punk go out there and wrestle 45 minutes to an hour? Ric Flair used to do it 4 times a week. Take his matches with Lex Luger. Lex Luger was this really green, monstrous, ferocious-looking dude who came in who really couldn't wrestle. But when you put him in there with Ric Flair, it would be a 1-hour phenom, and the matches were just 5 stars every time. Ric Flair can have a 5-star match with a broom. That's the truth. So, as the years went on, and Ric Flair got more and more popular, all at this point we wanted to see was Ric Flair in the WWF, Ric Flair in the WWF, Ric Flair in the WWF. I was praying as a kid. And then it happened. And this is the truth. This is the honest-to-God truth. September 1992, I go to a WCW match at the Meadowlands. Brendan Byrne Arena. The main event was supposed to be Ric Flair versus whoever it was. I forgot who it was. But he had just pulled out of WCW at the time, and they substituted Barry Windham in there for him. And the whole entire crowd at the Meadowlands, they're all chanting, "We want Flair. We want Flair. We want Flair." Of course, Flair never came. And then the best part is, it might have been a couple months, it might have been like July or June. It was a couple months before because he showed up in September. And then, finally, after 15 years, September of 1992, it was probably the greatest moment for me as a wrestling fan. When I saw Ric Flair on WWE, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. When I saw Ric Flair and the WCW championship, the big gold belt, that was never on the WWF, it was shunned, that Bobby the Brain Heenan took on WWF television for the first time and said, "This is the real world's championship, the real world champion's belt." And I just knew it. And then Flair came a couple of weeks later. So let me flash forward you. Actually, this is probably, besides maybe the Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan WrestleMania 6, because I marked out like a bitch in that match too. This is probably my favorite match of all time. The whole entire time, the Royal Rumble 1992, and my dad is just as big as a Ric Flair fan as I am. We both love him. The only person that we're waiting for the whole time was Ric Flair, Ric Flair, Ric Flair. And then 1992, the Royal Rumble, #1, his music goes off, this 2001 Space Odyssey. I knew he was winning right away. I knew he was winning. And me and my dad were going nuts in the living room, absolutely apeshit nuts. And then you watch the whole entire Royal Rumble match go through. When this guy dumped Hulk Hogan over the top rope, I swear to God, you would have thought the New York Mets or the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl. Like, it was, I was screaming in my living room, going around in circles. And, at the time, we still thought wrestling, there's little rumors that wrestling still might be real, even though I knew it wasn't from a long time. It still wasn't what it's like in today's age. So I'm wooing, my voice is completely gone, and Ric Flair holds up the title, and he says, I've been around the world, I've held every single belt, but this is the belt that means everything, and this is the most important world title that you're not the real world champion until you hold this belt, and without a shadow of a doubt in my eye, I'm the real world champion. And man, that moment for me was probably my greatest wrestling moment, just because I was such a Ric Flair fan. So, that being said, that was 1992. The guy was still a legend until 2000. He was still putting up 5-star matches until at least 2001. And then he got a little older, and he got misused by Eric Bischoff. And, Eric Bischoff kind of, I read Ric Flair's book, it's down here, kind of did a lot to his confidence. And you could tell he was a different performer for a couple of years there. But for those of you who don't know, like, Ric Flair really, really was that good. He does need to retire, and it's a little bit of a shame watching him hold on to his career this long. The perfect setting, like I said, would have been the WrestleMania send-off from Shawn Michaels, and ultimately that's the reason why I ranked Shawn Michaels ahead of him. But I hope for those out there who don't know, Ric Flair was the epitome of cool. He was as cool as they come, and he is probably, top 2-3 wrestlers of all time. So this is John Ammo from the Archives. Thanks for watching.